Hello there and welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to our retro review of Grand Theft Auto 3. Now right from the get-go we are going to be doing something a little bit different this time. The more eagle-eyed gamers among you may have noticed that this footage is not actually from the original Grand Theft Auto 3, and that's because we're going to be doing a review of the original PlayStation 2 Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto 3 as it was portrayed in the definitive edition of Grand Theft Auto the Trilogy over on the PS4. Because these are pretty much the same game apart from the graphics, the review is going to count for both, but we will talk about the differences in graphics and how they are received, but for now, let's focus on GTA 3 as it stands. Now obviously, GTA 3 was not the start of a game franchise. In fact, it wasn't even the third of the Grand Theft Auto games, it was actually the fifth game to be released, even if it was the third mainline game. But for the majority of modern Grand Theft Auto fans, this will be the first game that truly inspired the rest of the franchise going forward, with the earlier versions of the game pretty much unrecognisable now to modern gamers. And while it wasn't the first sandbox design type game, it was certainly one of the ones that popularised it most successfully, to the point where so many other games since have been referred to as GTA clones. This is pretty much just basic gaming terminology at this point. Released in 2001, the game follows the adventures of Claude, our silent protagonist, and I say protagonist because he's hardly a hero. The guy is a clear-cut criminal who, during a bank robbery, was betrayed and left for dead by his girlfriend, and now his quest for revenge leads him to get tangled in the dark and murky criminal underworld of Liberty City. The story is full of twists and turns and doesn't take itself too seriously. The reality is there's an awful lot of criminal mob type cliches running through this game to the point of parody, and that is by design. The game designers themselves had made it very clear that despite how brutal and intense this game could be, it was never meant to be taken seriously. Liberty City is a wide open map that's divided into three main areas, with the initial area open from the start and others becoming accessible as the game progresses. The player will work through a number of different missions, most of which will open up aspects of the story and allow you to meet new people that give you new missions that continue to spiral outwards from there. There's also a whole host of side quests which aren't really relevant to the story at all, but can still be quite fun to play and can help you get a bit of extra cash so you can buy more weapons. These include acting as a taxi driver, or even stealing a police car and becoming a crime fighter for a little while, with a hint of extreme prejudice involved. The majority of these missions, and the gameplay in general, revolves around either driving or third-person combat. But when this game came out, it was the open world aspect of the game that really stood out. Yes, the missions and gameplay were really enjoyable, but the fact that you could just openly explore this huge sprawling metropolis and jump into missions as and when you chose to was something that really captivated the audience. For many, it was one of the first times we'd ever really played a game that allowed us to step into a whole other world, that allowed us to explore this world as we wanted to, at the rate and pace we wanted to. No two people had the exact same gaming experience, and that was something so fresh and new. One criticism that some gamers had was that the controls weren't always perfect or the most intuitive. Because the game focused on so many different things, the driving wasn't 100% perfect, nor was the aiming and targeting for the shooting aspects of it, but none of these were especially weak. In many ways, the game's biggest strength was the soundtrack and audio. The voice acting, whilst cliched and at times playing on stereotypes, was still very entertaining, and it fit the style of the game. But within the cars, the actual radio stations were absolutely phenomenal. There was a great range of music, not just one style. It didn't matter whether you wanted cheesy music, whether you wanted techno, dance or rock, you had a radio station to listen to with a fair bit of variety. But it was also the links and chat in the radio that added a lot of humour to the game. So overall, how was GTA 3 received on its release back in 2001? Well, we're going to have to split this into two parts. You see, first of all, the game garnered critical acclaim at the highest level. It got scores in the mid-90s and even a few 100% or A+s as a game. According to Metacritic, it's a joint first as the best PlayStation 2 game ever made, and it actually ranks as joint 6th as one of the best games ever made on any console. That's pretty high praise. It received multiple awards and nominations for awards, and a lot of praise for having a far less linear gameplay style than most other games that were out at the same time. The graphics and audio received a lot of praise, as was expected, with the only thing ever really gaining any criticism being the slightly clunky combat system. However, I did say we were going to have to split this part into two, and that is because this game also received an awful lot of criticism. You see, GTA 3 was a main console trendsetter, as being one of the first games to really branch in to adult-focused gameplay. The violence, the sex, the drug references, and so much more besides garnered a lot of criticism from people that blamed computers and video games for violence and crime in the real world. Rockstar even faced a number of court cases based around this, and I'm not going to give it too much credit or time because, quite frankly, in my personal opinion, this game was designed for adults. If younger people were allowed to play this, that is the fault of the adults that are allowing them to have access to it. And if adults are acting this way because of a game, that speaks more about them in my opinion than the game itself. So I'm going to move on from that now. So now we move on to that standard question, the one I love to ask. How does this game stand up to modern scrutiny? And this is where we bring in the Definitive Edition. You see, playing this again, I used the Definitive Edition, and the gameplay all still stands up perfectly. Yes, you can play this one now and see that there are certain things that are missing from the newer versions of the game. However, I'd also add that the newer GTA games add an awful lot of complications which take away some of the simplistic fun that can be found in this game. The only real criticism is, again, some of the combat and driving as well, in my opinion, does feel a little bit clunky and awkward, especially when you're being forced to race. And perhaps one other thing. Whilst there is a big open world to explore, the reality of it, most of it is just there. You can't really enter many buildings or do very much. That's something that the games going forward would expand upon. But that's nitpicking realistically. And I will say, having played both of them, I don't think the Definitive Edition made any changes to this, which is good. The gameplay, the content, everything else was the same. It was only the graphics that it improved on. Now, a lot of people have criticised the Definitive Edition, saying that the graphics are not an improvement, and there's two main reasons for this. First of all, when it was first released, there were a whole host of issues that were addressed with bug fixes, such as the rain, and there was all kind of reports that when it rained, the game was unplayable. I did not find this to be the case at all, whether that's because by the time I played it, bug fixes had corrected this, or simply because it wasn't the case. In my opinion, it played absolutely fine. Other people pointed out that the improvements to the graphics were nowhere near as good as things that people had done themselves online, mod fixes, or custom changes made by people on the PC. And that might be the case, but realistically, I don't care. I don't care what other people have been able to do. This game is a piece of art, and the creators themselves have made this version, and for me, the improvements in this version are noticeable. Do they make a massive change to the game? No, but I didn't want a massive change to the game. So, for me, the definitive edition is absolutely fine, and the original version is absolutely fine. I'm not actually going to rate them any differently. The graphical tweaks are minor and make it enjoyable, but I would have been just as happy with the original version of the game. The GTA franchise has continued to evolve, but judging this game on its own merits, both versions deserve a 9 out of 10. I know a lot of people will agree with me on the original version and may deeply disagree about the definitive edition, so comment below, let me know, what do you think of GTA 3? And until next time, take the high ground.